All right. All right then. We're going to be talking about making housing choices real. So that's the first bit. A bit of housekeeping. You can mute to yourself, and you can turn your camera on, as the icon says shows you there. Um, Please do use the chat if you've got any questions or anything. That's there. And also use the reaction key as well. That's the raise the hands and thumbs up. And also, if you want to leave it, you just press end. I hope that just says it all. Right. Next slide, please. Today's plan is to tell you about the guide, also to explain how we hope people can use it, and share two examples of the resources. First of all, we're going to listen to Jordan Smith, who is a Learning Disability England member, and he's going to talk about what is important.
Informed decisions about where we want to live. We need to have the informed choices. I want to live in a house that I call a home. I want to live. I want to have all the things in that home that I like and enjoy. I want to be able to choose and control where I live, who I live with, who supports me, and how I'm supported. At the moment, in my own experience, it's about we need to fill this void, we need to fill this vacancy. Sometimes you're sharing with people who you've never met, who are not person matched to you. We talk a lot about support workers being matched to the people that they're supporting, but that also counts when you're living with people and whether you get on with them and what your interests are. If you're living with people with the same interests, you've got a far better chance of if you're living with people who don't share the same interests as you. So I think that there needs to be more choice and control of the housing options for people. And I think whatever housing choice that you choose, there needs to be more houses for people to live in the community rather than some of the other settings that currently people are in. That people listen not to hear, but they listen to understand people's needs and wants and wishes. If I was an able-bodied person, I get to choose from an estate agent many different housing choices and options. But when you're in social care, those choices sometimes can be severely limited to where there's a space. And sometimes you have to wait a long time for that space to open up. And so you don't feel in full control of that choice. I also think it comes down to funding, and not just more funding, but how we better spend that money as well in people's communities. And like others within Learning Disabilities England and outside, that you know, I too want a gloriously ordinary life, and that includes, a home for me is your base. It's the base for a springboard for everything else that happens in your life. So, wouldn't it be great that everyone had a choice of where to live and who to live with, and that they had full control over that choice, just like everyone else?
there's a lot of stuff on there what Jordan says, and I agree with all of it. And we do need more housing, and so our next person is going to speak is Claire Skidmore. She's from the National Health Service England, and she'll be talking about why we made this guide.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, good. So as Gary said, I'm Claire Skidmore. I'm the National Strategic Housing Lead in the Learning Disability and Autism Programme at NHS England. And the reason I'm the National Strategic Housing Lead is because we do have a operational housing lead who leads on the funding that we provide for specific to help develop homes for people. So the reason that we asked Learning Disability England to do this work was because, well, first of all, at NHS England, we do have a role in helping local areas to support people with a learning disability and autistic people to leave mental health hospitals and when people are inpatients and move into their own homes, and also to help prevent people from being admitted to hospital in the first place. But we also work with local areas to support people with a learning disability and autistic people to live longer, healthier lives in general. So it's about the whole of somebody's life. And I have a housing role, so I'm an unusual person. I work in the NHS, but I have a housing role. We also have 7 senior housing managers who work in each NHS England region. So there is that commitment regionally as well to supporting housing. So we all know that having a good home, which meets your needs and enables you to live the life you want to live, is really important in all of this. And that's why we have a programme around housing. And we heard from so many people that it's really hard to find out information about housing choices and options. It's hard to know where to start. It's hard to know what information is out there, where to look, what questions to ask yourself or your loved ones if you're thinking about where might I want to live in the future, and what are your rights. So this guide is for people who are thinking about and planning where they want to live in the future, for families and friends who are helping their loved ones to do that thinking and ask those questions. There's advice in there about who you might want to talk to in your local area, who might know. And it's also for people working in health, social care, information advice services. There's lots of useful information here that I think would be useful for lots of people, because I think housing can be quite confusing world, to navigate if you're not from housing. But also, we hope that you'll feel that you can share this with people and their families themselves to help them to think through their options. So I hope it's going to be really useful. I think it's really accessible and really, hopefully you'll see during the course of this presentation, really easy to use and covers a lot of the main topics that you might be thinking about when you're thinking through your future housing. I think that's it from me. Unless anyone's got any questions later on, maybe.
Yeah, we're going to take questions later. Thanks, Claire. That's brilliant. Hi, everybody. I'm Sam, whose sound wouldn't work. Who knows why? But I work with Gary at Learning Disability England. And as Gary said, this session, we didn't want to take you through the whole guide page by page on the website, because we thought that might be a little bit boring. But it was great to hear from Jordan. It's pity he couldn't join us in real life, but also we wanted to share with you some examples of what's in the guide. And as Claire says, there's lots of different resources, different ways of trying to help people think about where they live in the guide. So now we're going to share with you a film from the North Yorkshire Self-Advocacy team, who made an easy read resource for people to use to think about, plan on where they live. I'm not going to tell you more about it. Their colleague Kim is here with us online, and she can answer any questions in the chat or any questions later. But I'm hoping now that this film will work first time as well. So fingers crossed.
Hello, my name is Dean Snowden. I'm a member and the vice chair of the local Hamptonshire local area group of Keering. And this here is the easy read guide to find a new home in this book here. The reason why we made this book is because it was a way to try and make it easy for people to try and find a home, what they want to live in, what they're most happy with now. And because there was a lot of hard work to do this, so we thought we'd try to make it easy by put all the information in one place.
Right, so do you want to tell us your name? Okay, and what do you hope the booklet helps with?
When people are moving,
Yeah?
when they move out,
When self-advocates are moving out?
I don't know.
What do you hope the booklet does?
When they're about to come, I'm moving out.
Yeah? And we want to make it
Really.
easier for them. So who do you live with, Dean?
I live with my mum and my 2 pet cats, and I find it important to live in a safe place like this, especially with family and family members and pets around, because they're got good company aside from the TV. But as long as you've got family and pets at home now, and the friends will be lucky now, this shows you're not alone now, because they'll be always there to help you whenever you need it at any time.
Right, Celestino, who do you live with?
Mum and dad.
Okay, and right, you've got to move to Newcastle.
No,
Why not?
I don't want.
Right, Celestino, why don't you live on your own?
I don't want to.
Are you happy where you are?
Yeah,
Does it have everything that you need?
yeah,
And do you feel safe there?
yeah.
So, Dean, why don't you live on your own?
The reason why I don't live alone is because although there's stuff I can handle, though, there's some stuff I can't handle or even understand, such as paperwork and bills and that. Then, because, like for example, I might actually make a mistake or end up losing more money or even go to jail even now. So I think it's important, as long as I got help, though, everything will be okay.
So, Dean, if you were to move away from home and not share with Mum anymore, what might be useful for you to use?
Well, I like to hope and believe that this booklet will be a start now, and also maybe try and get information from family members or friends I know in case I need more help than this though. But still, I think this will be handy, along with friends and family trying to help me though.
Hello, we made the housing booklet because we wanted the people to get involved in the housing option. We made the booklet into an accessible language for everybody to understand about the needs and options about housing.
Hello, I live in my own flat. It's nice to live in your own flat.
So just
I live round Harrogate area.
QR.
I'm living in my flat down Harrogate tonight. Between the countryside and getting into town.
I'll sign out already.
So it's good. You can come when you go back home at night time, you can shut your door and you can just have your own space. Enjoy the booklet, enjoy the work we done with the partnership board, with the booklet, give more answers, get in touch with the team from the partnership board. Bye for now, have a nice day.
Thank you to them. And as a fellow Northerner, it's great to hear those Northern accents, having started with Jordan in Essex. So I'll hand you back to Gary.
Yeah, and thanks for keyring, and now we got Christine Towers from Together Matters, and talking about an example, the Thinking Ahead guide.
Thank you very much for inviting me to talk about the Together Matters resources that are in LDE's excellent new housing guide. I don't know who's moving the slides on. Lovely, thank you. Choosing somewhere to live feels like such a big decision for people, and using good quality information just leads to decisions that are so much more likely to work well and be an enjoyable living situation for people. So I think all this work that goes into planning and thinking about where someone would like to live is absolutely invaluable, and it's brilliant to see this new housing guide. Okay, I'm going to talk about 3 things we've learned about from talking to people about their housing choices, and from running workshops for families, family carers, and training for social care, education, and health practitioners. I'll just run through them quickly. The first one's really taking a step back from thinking about housing. We just found it's really helpful to do more general thinking and planning before thinking about housing, if that's at all possible. Housing and support has become so complex. I've seen that over the decades I've worked in learning disabilities, and families need a lot of time and support to understand the choices. Otherwise, decisions are, it's really hard for them to involve their son or daughter. It's just hard to understand what's going on and what's being suggested. And also, over time, I've really realised that if we have resources that can be shared across people with a disability, their families, and social workers and support workers, it really helps people to have meaningful conversations. And that really includes better assessments for housing. There's a lot more in-depth thinking that's gone in and informs housing assessments. Okay. So the first point around, doing a bit more general thinking for thinking about housing specifically. Three resources that are available on the Together Matters website. They're all available there to download. So Thinking Ahead, a planning guide for families, helps families just have that information to think about options that are available. It's been around for 10 years now, and over that time it's been helping families really to plan, think about future plans and how they can do that. I'm Thinking Ahead is an easy read guide, and it really complements the Thinking Ahead guide and helps to make sure people with a disability are included in conversations and find their own ways of shaping what happens. And again, that the guide can be used directly by people themselves, or family carers or practitioners can use it to help them think about some of the questions they should be asking and thinking about. And the third resource that actually I've been a bit cheeky putting this in because it's not in the LDE guide because it's come out since then, but it was a guide that was written for people with physical disabilities. I wrote it with people with physical disabilities in Essex for Essex County Council. And I think there's some information in there that's, again, really useful generally for people with a disability, and particularly for people with learning disabilities who also have a physical disability. So I just wanted to alert people to that. Maybe we can actually add that to the LDE guide at some point in the future. Okay. So the I'm Thinking Ahead, the Easy Read Guide, is a really good place to start some planning. And families, I use this a lot with families to help families think about how they can open up conversations and sort of look at what they might want to be thinking about. So there's 3 sections other than the housing one: how to plan, how to make choices, and how to be part of the world of work. And I think Jordan and Gary have both alluded to this, or talked about this, that making choices is really, how do people really get to make the choices they want, and actually thinking a bit about what helps people make choices before they have to make major choices like where might I live is, I think, really helpful and a really good starting point. So The planning for housing then follows quite nicely from having done some of that more general thinking. And I think all these things, oh, sorry, you just put back. And I think more generally, you know, all these things link together. They're not separate, you know, they're not separate things that we plan for. I think we need to think about planning as being a much more holistic thing that, you know, any bit of planning in any bit of our life helps us with planning in other bits, and it starts to shape that as well. So the more we practice planning and think about planning and get skills in planning, the more helpful it is when we come to think about something specific. Okay, so just to give you an example of this, I think thinking about friendship and support networks is so important when we're thinking about housing. So in Thinking Ahead, there's a section in the Planning Guide for Families, there's a section on building friendships and support networks. Then in the I'm Thinking Ahead guide on how to be part of the world of work, there's some ideas around how to build connections with your local community and how to do some community mapping. And although they're being described there in relation to thinking about work, they're very good for any part of life, just thinking about what you might want to do or where you might want to live. So I think this is an example of how it all links up. If you can use this information to think about your local area and where you would have friendships, connections and support, that might help to guide in thinking about whereabouts would be a good place to live, especially for people who live in large local authorities where actually, you know, there's very, you know, things are quite remote, can be quite remote from things that are important to people. Okay. So, so this is the I'm Thinking Ahead guide, how to get the right housing and support. And in that guide, we've divided it up with three main, we'll call them three big questions. So question one is, who do you want to live with? Question two, where do you want to live? And question three is, what help would you need? Let's just move on. So this is an example of some of the sort of templates. So the I'm Thinking Ahead is very much templates that people can think about. They pose questions, and I think often I'm saying, you know, the answer, whilst the answer might be important, we've got yes, no, maybe there as answers. It's actually the discussion that it triggers that's really important. And then on top of that, there might be, you know, definite yeses, definite nos, things you want to rule in, things you want to rule out. But a lot of it might be a maybe and a probably. But it's actually the discussion. It helps people think, oh, this is what we're talking about when we talk about housing. Because what I've discovered really is that people get asked, you know, do you want to leave home? Do you want to move house? And people aren't really supported to think enough about what does that question actually mean. So I think this guide is a very good introductory way of beginning to think about what housing might mean to me, what, you know, what might it mean to us as a family. Okay. So the second point I said that we'd learned was that families need good information. And I think so this is going back to Thinking Ahead, a planning guide for families. So in that, there's a lot more written information. There are some templates to record information and things like that, but it's much more information there to help families really get an idea of weighing things up. One of the things I think is I like about this section is that we've divided the housing and support, how it works, into options that may currently be available in the local area, and then options for arranging something new. And I think, again, talking to families, often they say that when you're talking about housing, they say there isn't really anything in our area that I think our son or daughter, places I think our son or daughter would like to live or that would work for them. So this is helping families to think how you can shape and influence things a bit, so that something a bit different is potentially looked at and arranged. Okay, slide please. So I'm just going back to shaping my future. One of the things, I think there's useful information in here. One of the things is about rights in relation to housing. There might be some useful things in there for people with learning disabilities and their families. Interestingly, Jordan mentioned about estate agents, and this, because this has a slightly different perspective. It is talking about estate agents and how to look for properties on the open market. So some of that information will be useful for people. The reason I really wanted to include it was that it's got information about equipment and adaptations. And I think maybe this is an area that we're not so good at thinking about for people with learning disabilities and autistic people, how some of those services could really support people when they're living in their own home. Okay. So the third point I made about what we learned was that it's bringing people's ideas together. And again, I think what I've learned is that there's so many kind of, I would say, slightly random conversations go on in different places, and they're not really brought together. The learning doesn't build, and the knowledge doesn't build. And people often say, I feel like I've said all this before, I'm starting again. So I think one of the actually joys I've seen from using I'm Thinking Ahead, and I think will be the same with the Learning Disability Guide, is that information starts to be gathered and get written down. In some areas, social workers have said that they're using the I'm Thinking Ahead section on how to get the right support, how to get support, housing support section, how to get the right housing support, sorry, that they're actually using it to carry out assessments for people when someone expresses an interest in moving. They actually use these resources to do a housing assessment. But even if they're not, I think doing some of these, using some of these templates and some of these ideas, and I'm sure there's lots more as well in the Learning Disability Guide that you could use, Learning Disability England Guide, is that you can share that information when you've gathered it, and you can share it with practitioners, and this will help them in their role. And often they don't really have enough time to get to know a person as much as they'd like to. And I think this is a way of actually making sure someone's voice is really heard. And you know, the time, there's much more time given to thinking and planning about what housing might be right. Okay. So one of the things that I think really helps with the gathering information is that in the guides, the templates are fillable text boxes. So that gives a really easy way to record information and ideas. So as long as someone downloads it and saves it, they can write information down that they've talked about. Someone can do that for them, and then that can get saved and it can get updated. It can also get shared if people want to share it. So it's a way of other people can contribute to it and comment on it, and people can think about it together and add their bits onto the templates. And I think this really helps with not keeping on starting from scratch and repeating things. And just another guide on the website is to help people be more involved in meetings. I mean, it says their annual reviews, but I've been using it just generally to help people think much more about being involved in meetings. So such as, an assessment or discussions around housing. And this was written for, it's for anybody, but particularly with people in mind who maybe don't use spoken language, or people who find a meeting situation or formal discussions really quite difficult. So it's looking at different ways that people can get their voice heard. And the image on the right is also a template for an annual review. And again, it's a very easy read, person-centered planning approach to thinking about what people want to talk about. So it includes housing, but it includes other areas of people's lives. And I think when planning for housing, it's also good to think about what other areas of your life are working or not working so well, and make sure that sort of thinking is also built into the planning around housing. Otherwise, it can become too much of a focus on housing without, all the rest of the other bits of life complementing that. Okay. So just to finish, I've got some top tips from families. This is really from lots and lots of workshops, and these are some of the key. There's actually lots of tips from families, but these are the ones I thought were really good to share today. So people's lives change, so try not to think of a move being the only place where someone will live. think about what might be right for a realistic length of time. I mean, that will vary between people, but I think it's quite overwhelming when you're trying to think about getting everything right, either for the person themselves or their family. But you know, people do move quite a bit. People do people learn from one experience of housing, and then there's opportunities to think about what would be a good move next. This has already been said, but don't start by asking a local authority what's available. I mean, I think Jordan raised this talk about voids and placements and everything. It's terrible language, and you know, we all need to really be saying this is not okay. Start with the conversations. You know, the family start with conversations with a relative and find out what they are thinking, and that will actually lead the conversation and inform that when you do go to the local authority, it'll be talking in a the person themselves and their family will feel much more in control and much more able to talk about what's important to them. And also the importance of just writing down all the ideas and information you gather and keep looking at this to hold on to what's important. It's quite easy, I think, in the discussions about housing to hear there's not much available, you know, there's not much choice, etc., and losing sight of the things that already as a family you've decided are important. And, you know, the person themselves is really saying, this is really what I want. It does take time, but it's really important to hold on to the things that do feel important. Okay, just the final slide. So you can keep in touch with Together Matters, or you know, go and have a look at the resources I've mentioned. They're all there. They're all free to download. If you've got any queries, if you have any difficulties finding the resources, just email me, and I'm very happy to help with that. And we're always very keen to know how people get on when we do workshops. We try to just share, you know, the learning that have been from people with learning disability and autistic people, and share that learning with other families. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christine. So we're over to me now, and the bit where I will actually start to talk to you about the guide. And so how we made the guide was we worked with a co-design group, which is a group of people with learning disabilities, autistic people, and some family members. One of the family members was mid-process of supporting their family member to plan and move out, and somebody else started it just after we finished the guide. So yeah, we had a lot of real life experience, and that group thought a lot about what was important to include and the easiest ways to get and use information. So we talked loads about how people might find it easiest to get the information and then be able to use it. And they really shaped how that would be. They didn't want a great big book. They were just like, don't just give me a great big book, because that feels too much and too difficult. I don't want that. We also looked around at what was already there. So thanks to the Keyring team and Christine from Together Matters, they're just two examples of what we found. We didn't want to go and start making things that already existed. So we looked around and we found examples of things that people were using, that the co-design group thought looked useful. And we also had people share stories with us about their experience and what others might learn from it. And we're really grateful to all of them. And then we tested it and checked it out with people. So we had some people read it, see if it worked, gave us bits of feedback, really helped us shape what is online now. Thanks, Rachel. So on the left-hand side is a little picture of one of the pages. And I included this page partly as well because the group were really, really keen that this was a rights-based resource, and that this focused on independent living. So not that people wouldn't have support in their lives, and that some people might have lots and lots of support in their lives and some people might only have a little bit, but that principle of people being in control of their lives and the support around them helping control their life. And that also people had the same and equal choices as their non-disabled peers. So we've talked about that a bit, and Jordan talked about being able to go down the estate agents. And we, you know, when we were making this, we talked a lot about the fact that housing is really hard for lots and lots of people in parts of the country at the moment. Well, pretty much everywhere, probably. But actually, the guide is based on the principle of if we don't know what's possible, then we'll never go out and try and work out how to make it do it. So we should know what might be possible and then work out if that fits for your life. And that won't mean that everybody gets everything they want, because that isn't the situation we're in with housing at the moment. It is mainly aimed at autistic people and people with a learning disability who have paid support from health and social care in their lives. So it mostly assumes that you might have some support around you, but it is also useful for people who don't have any paid formal support in their lives. Lots of it will also be helpful. We've tried to break it down into sections so that fits with that bit, and I'll talk about the sections in a minute, but that bit about don't just give me a great big book because I'll never read it and it'll feel too overwhelming. And we tried to make it as easy to understand as possible. And we have some words explained. So where there are blue words in it, so you can see on the screen on the left-hand side, there are some words that are in blue. If you click on those, you'll get taken to something that explains what they mean. Rachel, thank you. So this is what it looks like. So it's divided into 8 parts. So there's a bit first off that is all about the guide and how the guide works and the kind of information, and they're all the blue buttons. And then there are 8 parts. There's one about making your own housing plan. So both the Keyring and the Together Matters resources in there, but also there's resources from the Preparing for Adulthood programme that had a lot of stuff around transition and young people, planning ahead. There's also resources from different organisations that work with people to think about if they've got particular needs around their property and sensory needs, or it being in a certain way. So there's lots of different versions of things from people coming at this in different angles. Then there's a really big section on your different housing options. So the guide doesn't assume that everybody will live in one kind of place. The guide says, do you know about renting a place? Do you know about buying a place? Do you know about supported living that's already set up, or shared group settings? Do you know about shared lives? Do you know about residential care and how that works? And it tries really hard to have like the pros and cons of things, the good and the bad. And then there are sections on rights around housing and support, and around quality and legal issues. So we tried to include all the things that people have questions about. Can somebody have a tenancy? What do you do? How do you know if it's any good? How do you find out this? We tried to find out what we could. Then we've got 2 sections on money, paying for things. There's a bit on paying for your home and what you might have to think about. And there's a bit about paying for living costs. And that really strongly came from the co-design group, who were really keen for people who hadn't had the experience of living away from a family home, for example, to really get the chance to think about how are you going to pay for stuff and what that might be like. And then we've got a really practical section on what can help you move. So different things that can you know, whether you might be able to try and find grants, or, you know, there are some top tips from people in it about how you beg, steal and borrow from everybody you know. But they wanted it to be as practical as possible. So that's what we've tried to do. Rachel. On each page, there is an easy read version you can load. So you can download each page in that section as an easy read version. So you can print it or not. At the bottom of each page, there's a link to each section, so you can go backwards or forwards. And then people's stories and examples, and there's a couple of films. There's a couple of great films. I urge you to go look at those. They are in a separate section, but you can always link through to them from each bit. And then on the front page, there is a button where you can download the whole guide in plain English. So we just put that once at the front, but you can download all of the content in one big go. And we thought that might be helpful to some people. I can see in the chat, somebody said, oh, could we put a link into something? I'll just talk about that. We will review in 6 months' time. Unless it's a really big problem with the guide, then we're not going to be able to keep making changes every week, because we just don't have the resource to do that and kind of keep on top of it. Because there's an easy read version of each page, if we update anything, we have to update that as well as the plain English. And we don't want to do it badly. That's what we're worried about. So if we realise like the whole law had changed or we'd made some terrible mistake, which we sincerely hope we haven't, we've checked it so much, but we might have missed something, then we would do that. But we're otherwise, if you've got advice for us, we'll add it to a list. We're going to add it to a list, and we want to keep making it better. And we're really keen to get feedback, but we can't promise that we'll do it, keep doing it really fast, just because we just don't have the resource to promise that it's that level of live. But we do want to keep it relevant, and we also want to learn from what we have missed or what we've got wrong. Because when you see, if you haven't looked at it yet, there are quite a lot of pages, and we're very keen to know, like I say, if we got anything wrong, or you think we can make it better. Rachel. So that's from me. Thank you. And I'll go look at the chat and see what people have said. But we're just keen for people to use it and know that they've got some rights, some choices, and to think, like Christina said, and like our North Yorkshire Self-Advocacy Group colleagues said, go think about it, think about what you might want, and know that you don't just, you know, as Jordan said, start with a conversation about this is your only choice. And I think I hand back to Gary now. Is that all right?
I was on mute. Thank you to everyone who came and shared a resource or a story. Check the guide and please give some feedback. And we hope it helps people get the right home for them. So I don't know what to.
Well, unless there's anything anybody wants to bring up that they haven't already in the chat or anything, I think we've shared it.
We shared everything.
And I'm very sorry that we don't know why our technical things are against us today.
Very sorry that I came late, but I was on, my internet was broken by our IT support this morning and nobody told me, so I had to get back onto them before I came in. I work for the Audieborn Trust, and what I've heard today has been very helpful, and getting a link to this would be brilliant, because we do bits of it, but having it in one thing would be amazing. Thank you very much.
We'll send all of you who signed up, if we've got your email, we'll send you the link. I'll put it in the chat again, and but also if you look on the Learn to Spit England website, hopefully you'll find it, but if you don't, let us know. Like we say, we're just keen for people to use it.
It's brilliant, thank you. Well done for all the effort put into it.
Okay. Well, in that case, we'll say thank you for coming, and go use it and let us know.
Right.
Thank you. Everyone. And thank you to Christine and Kim and colleagues. You'll thank Celestino and Sam and Christopher and Dean, won't you, for us? We're really grateful.
Thank you, everyone.
It's been a very useful introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got to go now, will we?